So what's your favorite beer? The best beer in the world? For me, it might just be St. Bernardus Ap 12. It's a dark quad that measures in around 10% ABV. Several years ago, I made a trip to Belgium and I had brought back a couple bottles of the West Vlaanderen 12. I did a side-by-side between the two. I think I like the St. Bernardus a little better, even though some rank West Vlaanderen as the best beer in the world. Well, I brewed my own quad. I thought it turned out pretty well. What do you think? Is it going to stack up against the St. Bernardus? Well, let's get brewing. Well, howdy there, this is Brent from Cascades Homebrew. At the time of this recording, it's the Friday before Thanksgiving here in the United States. I'm taking next week off work for vacation. So I figured what could be a better way to kick off the weekend than drinking a couple big beers. If you watch some of my videos, you probably know that brewing Belgian beers are some of my favorite. Beer in a brew that competes head-to-head with St. Bernardus Ap 12 is high on my list of brewing goals. So my goal would not be to brew a clone of St. Bernardus, but to brew something that competes similar and also embraces both the complexity and also the simplicity of Belgian beers. I recently brewed a quad of my own. I think it turned out pretty good. I don't have any footage of the brew day. My homebrew club, Howl, the Homebrewers of Western Loudon, arranged a wort share with Solace Brewing Company. Solace is a local brewery here in the Northern Virginia area that makes some great beers, especially hazy IPAs. So as part of the wort share was a competition among brewers that made a beer from the wort. The first part of that was a competition where the beers were scored and then ranked by certified judges. My quad ended up winning first place in that one. As a result, I was able to take home a jaded Hydra wort chiller as a prize. Awesome. The second part of the event was a People's Choice Award, where people that attended the event got to vote for their favorite beers that they tried. Again, my quad won first place in the People's Choice. Awesome. So I guess I'm not the only one that thought it turned out pretty well. Well, enough rambling about that. Let's get on to the brew day and then let's taste these beers. So instead of a typical brew day where I start by prepping water and crushing grains, this time I had to relax a little bit at the brewery, enjoy a pint, while I picked up my bucket of wort. So the brewery made the wort, but they reported the grain bill is 78% Canada malting 2-row, 15% Canada malting white wheat, and 7% Briess Munich 20. So I took that information and I came up with an estimated grain bill. This is for about a 5-gallon batch, so it's a little over 10 pounds or 4.6 kilograms of a 2-row pale malt, about 2 pounds of a white wheat malt, and about a pound of a Briess Munich. This may not exactly match the wort, but it's probably close enough. So the gravity of the wort that I brought home measured 1055. When it was cool, I measured the volume to be about 5.6 gallons or 21 liters. At near boiling temperatures, it expanded to about 5.9 gallons or about 22 liters of wort. I brought the wort up to a boil and added a pound or 250 grams of D180 candy syrup. I also added another pound or another 450 grams of Demerara sugar. At the start of the 60-minute boil, I added half an ounce or 14 grams of Northern Brewer. That should add about 12.6 IBUs. No, there were no dark grains added to this batch, just the sugar. That's where I figured I would get all my color from. So why didn't I add some dark malts, maybe like a Special B? Isn't that pretty common in quads? Well, I think it is. I'm not sure how common it is actually in Belgian breweries. I kind of like the idea of a very simple grain bill with getting a lot of that complexity either from the yeast or from sugars. I did notice one St. Bernardus clone on the web just called for a little bit of a black debittered malt, probably just to give a little bit of color, maybe a touch of a roast character. It'd be kind of interesting when you taste these to see what the complexity difference is between the two. So with 10 minutes left in the boil, I added an ounce of Hersbrucker hops. The Hersbrucker I have is a pretty low alpha acid. I also added half of a Werflock tablet and 2.2 grams of yeast nutrient. So the yeast for this one was WLP 530 from White Labs. Supposedly it's the Westmalle strain. It's a yeast I've made some great beers with. In this case, it was some harvested yeast, and I made a starter just to make sure that it was good to go. So I don't have a lot of details on it, but I open fermented it. Essentially what I did was I took a hop sack over top of my Furmonster fermenter, but it was sitting in my fermentation chamber. I'm not quite sure how much oxygen exchange there is. I saw some pretty interesting seminars on YouTube on the Escarpment Labs where they talked a little bit about the advantage of open fermentation. It's something I want to play with more, and it'd be interesting to do a side-by-side comparison. I don't have a lot of notes on the actual fermentation temperatures, so I note that I started it at 68 degrees for the first couple days, Ramped it up about 70 degrees after a couple days, but after that I'm not quite sure how warm I can let it go. I've typically let WP530 rise in the mid 70s, say up to like 76 degrees Fahrenheit, or maybe even a little warmer with good results. At bottling time, I measured that I had about 4.8 gallons of wort, or 18 liters to bottle. My target carbonation level was about 3 volumes. I calculated that would require 150 grams of table sugar, and I added that into a bottling bucket. I also added 5 grams of CBC1 yeast. It's a yeast that's specifically designed for bottling. In the past, I've had bottle carbonation issues, both with a quad and a double that were fermented with WP530. So I wanted to make sure this one was adequately carbed, and it worked out really well. So moving forward, using a yeast like CBC1 is going to be very common for me with high ABV beers. It's just very cheap insurance to make sure they're properly carbonated in the bottle. So the overall statistics on this beer, the original gravity came in at 1088 with a final gravity of 1016. That gave me an ABV of 9.7% with 81% attenuation. The calculated IBUs were 17 and the SRM was 20. In relationship, AP12 comes in at 10%, so almost the same ABV. The AP12 information says 20 IBUs, with just a touch higher than mine. Their color is at 30, which should be a noticeably darker beer than mine. Let's go ahead and open up these beers and give them a try. So what I did, I got 2 glasses here. I went ahead and marked them on the bottom. The beers may be obviously different in color, which means it'll be easy for me to tell them apart during the tasting, but if they're close enough, then maybe it'll be kind of tough. First, let's try my quad. Carbonation looks very nice. Nicely carbonated, nice rich head. All right, and let's try the St. Bernardus. Again, nicely carbonated beer, nice rich head. They actually look very similar in color from here, so that should be good. So I'll go ahead and fill this one up, make sure they're at the same level, and then I'll mix them up, and then we'll come back and we'll try to taste them and see if I can tell the difference and see which one I like the best. All right, it's time to go in for some taste and evaluate these. Their color, so the appearance on the two is remarkably similar. The head is on both of them, a nice creamy light tan head. The color, you know, if I hold them up to the bright light here, I cannot tell a difference. If somebody said these were the exact same beer, that would be fine. They look identical in color, both in the hue and the darkness. I feel like I can see maybe a little bit of light through this one here on my left, the one on the right, and whether that's just a haze or maybe it's just a touch darker, I'm not sure. So if we go in for aroma, oh, got a lot of dark fruits, a lot of, you know, the Belgian kind of sweet esters. It's really nice. Let's see with this one. Again, a lot of really nice aromas. I feel like I get a little bit more fruity kind of character with this one. Very pleasant. They both have a very pleasant aroma. You know, very typical of a Belgian quad. No, neither of them have, I would say, any roast character in it. They both have some kind of dark fruit and that complexity. So far, it's looking pretty good at a head-to-head. Oh, it's nice. So I haven't had a AP12 in several months, and I haven't opened a bottle of mine in probably a month or so. I've definitely never tasted them side by side. Ooh, that one's really good. Just got a lot of, kind of hard to describe, maybe some, I want to say citrusy, but that's not really what it is. A lot of complexity, a lot of dark fruit, a little sweetness to it. Just a really nice beer. Okay, so these are both very good beers. So one thing I find with these videos, before I reveal which is which, you don't want to be too concrete on what you say about a particular beer. They're both incredibly good beers. This one on the right, it's got more of this sweet, dark fruit character that is really nice. The one on the left, it's got a lot of the same character, just a little less and maybe a little bit more, I wouldn't say roast at all. There's just a little bit of that sort of, dark character to it. And honestly, I can't say, I think I want to say I prefer this one a little better. I just think it's more flavorful. So I guess my question about this beer, does it feel a little too sweet? And compared to, because it definitely has a little bit more of a sweetness. I feel like maybe this one, is one maybe you could drink a full glass of and kind of feel like you enjoyed it, where maybe this one feels like it's maybe a little touch sweet. So what I'm going to say, in my quick evaluation of drinking a little bit, I actually prefer this one better, but I'm thinking it's probably my homebrew, because it's just, maybe it's got that sweetness, maybe it's a little too sweet, but it's got a lot of really nice complex flavors to it that I really enjoy. And I'm thinking this one's the St. Bernardus, just because it's again, very, very good beer. These are both very good beers. And it's just maybe a little more on the drinkability. All right, so let's go ahead. Let me take a peek at the reveal. Yeah, so this is my homebrew, Cascade Homebrew one. And of course, this one, the St. Bernardus. So I find this kind of trial extremely informative, just in a sort of semi-blind manner. And then tasting a beer next to a really good commercial example of it really kind of sets your palate, sets a standard for it, and kind of gives you something to compare to. So I'm always kind of thinking about these two. Is there anything with my homebrew that I would change to make it better? So I think it was the St. Bernardus, as I said, was maybe a slightly, I could see through it a little bit. They both have a nice kind of ruby highlights. So I was worried the color in mine was just going to be too light, and maybe I was going to have to add some dark malt to boost it up. But clearly, just with the grain bill that was in there, with a little bit of Munich in the base grain bill, and then adding in the D180 sugar, the color is there. So I guess the question I have, now my home brew definitely has more of a sweetness to it. So I don't know if it's not a thick, cloying sweet. I think they both have a really nice mouthfeel to them. Let's use that Demerara sugar, just kind of trying it out. Thought it'd be kind of interesting, both in this and then also in my double or double. And I think they both, I think it maybe adds a little bit of that sort of caramelized sugar sweetness to it. So that'd be an interesting thing to try without that. So if instead of the Demerara sugar, I just use straight up some table sugar to give that little boost of alcohol and a little that dry flavor to it. Do I need to add Special B? There's no complexity or difference in these that related to sort of the dark fruit character. They both have what I look for in that area of this type of beer. They're both really nice, both in the aroma and the flavor. They've got that sort of dark fruit, that sort of plum raisin kind of character. So this beer was made with wort, pre-made wort. If I was brewing the beer, I wouldn't add as much wheat as was in the base malt. I don't know that wheat is very common in quads, although it doesn't distract, and I'm not sure if so it's not a bad addition, I don't think. So do I have any takeaways from this? One, WLP 530 has made some incredibly good beers for me. I'm really happy with it. The open fermenting, does that make a difference? I'm really curious to try that again. Does Special B need to be in a quad? This is a clear example that it's not, and I'm not sure that St. Bernardus uses Special B either. So I'm pretty happy that I brewed a beer that compared to what I think is one of my favorite beers, one of my best beers in the world. And it's in the same ballpark, and it competes, and I was not sure tasting these which one was the homebrewed beer. Although technically, maybe it's not a homebrewed beer since it's commercially brewed wort. I don't know. So I definitely have some good information here to move forward with brewing my own quad and what I want in a quad and what I can do to make a good quad. In the meantime, I still have about a case or so of this beer to finish up. So I want to give a shout out to Brew Like a Monk. When I first got this book, I felt a little disappointed. Probably has kind of a lot of vague information. It doesn't give you a step-by-step information exactly how to brew a Belgian beer. It's a lot of pieces of information from this brewery and that brewery and some kind of vague information, but every time I read through it, I find a little more nugget that kind of gives me a little bit more insight in how to brew great Belgian beers. It's a highly recommended book. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out this playlist for other information on building great beers, and also check out this recommended video. And make sure you subscribe, that way I show up in your feed. And also, leave me a comment. Have you ever brewed a beer that competed head-to-head against your favorite commercial beer? What was it? What is your favorite commercial beer? Let me know. Cheers!